Hi, my name is Adrian, and this is my very first devlog, and subsequently my very first video on the channel. I'm creating a game that combines platforming in a top-down isometric environment, alongside some bullet hell elements, and a bit of some roguelite elements as well. There are three main things I hope to achieve with these videos. Number one, I want to eventually release a demo for the game by the end of the summer. 2, I am hoping to make myself accountable by making these devlogs so that I'm consistently working on this game. 3, I hope to bring traction to this game by making videos online. This video will be a showcase of everything I've done within the last 6 months, along with retelling how I went about doing some things in this game. Just to note, things are pretty much still in early development, so things are subject to change. But with that out of the way, let's get on to the main content of the video. Being a top-down game, the player can move in 8 directions. However, unlike the typical top-down game, my player has the added ability to jump. This jump allows the player to do things such as reach higher elevations, and jump over enemy bullets and enemies themselves. This mechanic isn't something I've really seen in a top-down game before, so I'm really excited to be working on it. I feel like there are a lot of obstacles I can make with this mechanic in mind too. Maybe falling platforms or spikes on the floor. There's really a lot I can do with this. However, I do feel like being able to jump whenever you want might make the game way too easy. Because if you could just spam the jump, you'll avoid all enemies without ever taking damage. I might add a stamina bar that goes down every time you jump. But I'm holding off on that because I really like the idea of being able to jump whenever you want, like in a platformer. And I feel like having a stamina bar might restrict that freedom. So I'm stuck between having more freedom or having more of a challenge. But let me know what you guys think. Next up, we have the roll. This roll is more of a movement option that allows you to go throughout the level faster. It doesn't really have a special use outside of that. So here's the deal. I'm not really good at level design, and I never plan to be. So the obvious choice for making levels in this game was to make them randomly generated. And here's how I go about doing it. Just to note, I don't think this is the normal way you go about generating levels. This is just the way I found to get what I want. So I might change it down the line if I need a different level layout. But so far, like I said, it does the job, and right now I'm going to show you how I do it. So first, in the create event of an object called, let's say, obj floor create, I make a 6x6 floor. I then choose a different direction, either going up, down, left, or right. Once I choose that direction, I go forward 64 spaces. And then in an alarm event, I call a repeat, and I repeat this repeat for let's say 8 times. And within each loop, I go forward 64 spaces and I spawn a bridge object. And then I keep doing that until the loop ends. Once the loop ends, I call an alarm event, and once again, I create a 6x6 rows of floors. And then once again, I choose another direction, either going up, down, left, or right. So far, this doesn't really take into account of, let's say, you went left, and then the next cycle, you go right again. You still end up with only 2 floors instead of a new one, which is something I'm gonna have to fix. Maybe check to see if you already were in that direction. But like I said, it does what I want it to. And basically, it goes through this entire process for as many floors as I want. I have a variable, and if I set that to 8, it'll repeat this process 8 times before destroying itself. And that's how I go about making levels in my game. So when it came to enemies, my first thought was to have each enemy be unique by giving them different bullet patterns. Say for example, one enemy would shoot a bullet while another one would just shoot 3 going out in 3 different directions. But I decided not to go with this, mostly because I feel like I could do a bit more with enemies other than just to give them different shooting patterns. What I wanted to do was give them different ways to approach the player, and even act defensively when a player approaches them. And so I've made 4 enemies that are supposed to showcase what I kind of want all the enemies in this game to do. So, for our first enemy, we have this basic little bat enemy. And what they do is that they slowly approach you and they shoot a bullet once they get close enough. This is the simplest of all enemies. It's supposed to be a easy enemy to dodge. Even if there's a lot of them, you won't be like getting hit that much. I might make the bullets faster, maybe, give a bit more of a challenge, but right now these guys are as simple as they get. Our next enemy is this little pig enemy, and what it does is that it approaches the player, and instead of shooting a bullet like the bat does, it charges at the player full speed. This enemy isn't like the rest because it doesn't really have a projectile that shoots. It moves fast enough to the point where it's basically the projectile itself. And it showcases that not all enemies are just bullet patterns in a way. They all have different ways of attacking the player. In this case, they charge at you. So our next enemy is a lot different. It's this basic monster enemy. And like all the others, it approaches you, but at a certain distance, it backs off, charges up an attack, and then shoots 3 bullets at your direction. If you approach them, they'll also back off. And this is supposed to showcase how some enemies don't always have to be aggressive. They can also have some sort of defensive tactic, like trying to get a distance away from the player. These are the hardest to get rid of, in my opinion, mostly because they move so far back from you and they charge up so quickly that you can't really land your shots in. And finally, our last enemy is this basic mushroom enemy. And with this enemy, I wanted to give it a movement just like the player. It also can jump and move to higher elevations too. The other enemies can't really get to a higher elevation, so that makes this one pretty unique from the rest. And as you can see, when it lands, it shoots 4 bullets going in different directions. This enemy is also hard to defeat too, because just like you, this player is able to dodge your projectiles when it's jumping as well. See, I try to attack it, but it's so high up, so it doesn't really land. And it does show how a enemy can be aggressive and yet be defensive too, and avoiding the player. These aren't the only enemies I plan to have. I'm planning to have a lot more enemies down the line, but this was just to showcase the potential enemies that this game can have. But let me know your thoughts. What enemies should be added to this game? I'd like to hear your ideas in the comments below. So, in my game, I have 3 different sword types so far. There's the standard sword, the dagger, and the large sword. And these 3 weapons differ in that they have different damage outputs and swinging speeds, with the dagger having the fastest swinging speed but lowest damage output, and the large sword having a low swing speed but the highest damage output. My plan is to also further these differences between weapons by making a system similar to Terraria, in which the same weapon can have different buffs and debuffs to them that might want to make you pick one weapon over the other. But I still haven't added that yet. That's something I'm going to add further down the line. Of course, these aren't the only weapons I plan to have in the game. I plan to have at least 3 more different weapon types. Maybe a bow or a hammer or a wand. I'm not really sure what else there'll be. So let me know what weapons you want to see in this game. In the top left corner of my screen, you can see some sort of emblem or icon. That icon is a spell, and what that is that each sword that you find in-game has a different spell tied to it. So the same sword that you find, one could have a fire spell, while the other one will have an ice spell. I think that'll also make each sword different from each other, and it'll further make you choose a sword other than a staff. And so far there are, I think, 5 different spells in this game. There's a boomerang, a fireball, an ice ball, a magic shield, and a standard magic bullet. So first up we have the boomerang. And what this weapon can do is that it pierces through enemies and then goes right back to where the player last was when he threw it. Yeah, so this weapon is better for fighting groups of enemies because then you can take out a bunch of enemies at one time. Next up we have the fireball. And what this does is once it hits an opponent, it burns them and then their damage starts to tick down until they die. So once this lands on an enemy, they're guaranteed dead. The burn doesn't go away. I might make it so that after a certain amount of time it does. But I think I like it this way. Up next we have the ice ball. And what this does is once it hits an enemy, it has a chance to freeze them, as you saw right there. So it's frozen. And then once it's unfrozen, it takes a huge amount of damage. The chance to freeze is pretty low, and I might change that so that it's like a half a chance. I might do the same thing with the fire bullet too, because always being able to burn seems way too overpowered right now. But we'll see what I do with that. Next up, we have the magic shield. And what this does is form a shield of, I guess, orbs around you that block all enemy bullets. It's a really good defensive option, and it shows that not all spells in this game have to be some sort of projectile or fireball or whatever that hurts enemies. I think it's good to have some defensive options too, in case you want to, play defensively. If, say, you're low on health and you can't afford to take any more damage. And last is, like, the most basic of all projectiles, the magic bullet. It's a basic bullet. It doesn't do much, no special properties, doesn't pierce through enemies. It's just a standard bullet. I might change it so that the bullet size is bigger and faster, so that you can tell it apart from the enemy bullets. Of course, I plan on adding more spells down the line. I'm not really gonna stick with these 4 or 5 spells. I already have some in mind too. I just wanted to get a basic system down, and so I only put like a few spells. But let me know what spells you guys have in mind for this game. I'm really excited to hear what ideas you guys could come up with. So you might be wondering, how am I supposed to get these swords in the first place? I was wondering the same thing. So at first, I made some sort of shop that had all these swords in it, and you could use the money you get from destroying enemies to get these swords. But then I had another idea, and this also goes into the fact that whenever you enter a room, there's nothing stopping you from exiting that room. You can go in and go out whenever you want. So theoretically, there's nothing really stopping you from exiting one room and going into another, and just basically going to the end of the level without having to fight any enemies. So that's why I have this. Here is a transparent chest with a certain number on it. That number has to do with the number of enemies you have to kill before that chest becomes available to you. So let's kill some enemies right now. Come on. Okay, there we go. And so now we have the chest. Once you press E on it, a sword pops out. You can pick it up, and it'll be added to your inventory right here. So I'm really happy with this system. I like it a lot because it's sort of a risk-reward system where you can choose to stay in the room and defeat all these enemies in hopes of getting a sword that has, good stats and a spell that's really useful in the level you're in. The further you'll go on in each stage, the stronger the swords will be. And so you'll want these swords to defeat each stage's boss. So this beats the idea of putting all these swords in a shop or something, just spending money for them, because I think that's kind of lame. Fighting for these swords I think is a better way to go about doing it. But I think I might have a sword shop too, so you can get certain swords or certain armors or anything. So this is our hub. So far you can talk to villagers. This is some sample text I've made just to see if it works. And this is our shop. You can't really enter the shop, but if you press E on it, you get a little menu with the name of the item and the cost. So far this doesn't really check for if you have enough money. So right now I can just buy as much as I want. And then when I open my inventory, they show up here. My plan at first was to make these items stackable, so you can have like 99 defense potions in one slot. But I thought that was way too ridiculous because that would make the game too easy. So what these potions do, the defense potion gives you a little shield, I guess you could call it, an extra hit. So this yellow orb represents your shield. This apple is basic healing, so if I use it, boom, I get 1 more health. And this attack potion increases your attack by 83%, but only for a limited amount of time. I can't really show that because I'm in the hub, but it works. I'm planning to have an extra shop down the line that has some sort of emblems that you can use to boost your stats, or a shop that lets you upgrade the amount of health you have in total. Now here's our bounty board. This is basically how you'll be selecting your stages in the game. So if I were to press E on this, you get some sort of pop-up that I want to make look like a wanted poster. And so if you hover over, let's say, Skullman, you get a little wanted poster right there with the reward amount and some caption beneath the picture. And so basically this is how you choose your stages. My plan to make these stages more unique is to have some sort of conditions, some weather conditions maybe, such as it's raining or the level's super dark or the level's on fire. There are many ways I can go about making each level unique from one another, and I can't wait to do that down the line. But so far, that's it. Of course, there's many things I want to add, and I'll probably get to in the next devlog. And who knows? Hopefully I can make this a consistent thing. I'm really excited to be sharing my progress on this game, and I would really like some feedback. I can't guarantee if the next devlogs will be as long as this one, mostly because this is showcasing like about 6 months of work. And so anything else I might add won't really be this much. And hopefully I can keep uploading until my summer break is over. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.